And in the next 30 minutes, the East African community says it will not send observers to the Democratic Republic of Congo, becoming the second bloc to be excluded from the elections. What is the stake in the DRC election happening in the next 24 hours? We'll find out shortly. And does blessed same-sex couple mean join them in holy matrimony? We'll look at Pope and gay rights here on Connect Africa. We have the latest from other parts of the continent. Stay with us.
Over 250,000 individuals have evacuated the conflict in a Sudanese state previously considered a secure refuge for those fleeing the civil war, according to the United Nations. For several months, Wad Madani, a city in Al Jazeera state, accommodated a significant number of people seeking sanctuary from the unrest in the capital, Khartoum. A humanitarian worker noted that residents in Wad Madani, situated southeast of Khartoum, are now dispersing in various directions because the paramilitary rapid support forces have moved in. Kenya's competition regulator has imposed a fine of $7.1 million on the local Carrefour franchise holder, Majid Alfutain, following allegations of pressuring suppliers into accepting reduced prices. The regulator asserted that the company had exploited its superior bargaining position with two suppliers. This penalty is the highest ever issued by the competition authority. On Tuesday, Nigeria's official market witnessed a historic decline of the naira against the dollar with limited trading activity. The currency exhibited significant fluctuations, mirroring levels observed in the unofficial parallel market where it trades. Governor Olayemi Kadoso of the Central Bank of Nigeria has affirmed a commitment to allowing market forces to dictate exchange rates. He emphasized the intention to establish clear, transparent, and harmonized regulations to govern market operations.
And some of the major stories making the rounds across the African continent. But we start off with our conversations tonight in the DRC because the Human Rights Watch says election-related violence across the Democratic Republic of Congo could undermine the general elections slated for tomorrow, December 20. About 44 million registered voters are expected to cast votes in the Central African nation to elect a president, members of the national and provincial Parliament and also the local offices. Reports say the elections, which have cost more than $1.1 billion, still faces logistical challenges such as how to secure votes and also voters in eastern DRC, where war has recently resumed between M23 and the Congolese army, as well as allied militias. Al Jazeera has been speaking to the Independent National Electoral Commission.
Country is big, the roads are not good. In addition to that, funding has been coming slowly, and this has resulted in us being unable to send the goods by sea. We do almost everything by air, and that comes with a huge cost.
We're getting there. The DRC now, as we know it, has joined the East African Community (EIC) on that was in May last year, but has had an unstable relationship with the bloc and is yet to assent to all of its relevant protocols. The East African Community says it will not send observers to the DRC, becoming the second of such bloc to be excluded from the elections. What is at stake come Wednesday, which is just a few hours away? Joining us live from the DRC is John Appiah, head of mission of the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, the official business arm of the Commonwealth with a mandate in over 56 countries to promote trade, investment and enterprise, which is key on the agenda going into this elections. John Appiah, thank you for spending some time with us here on Connect Africa. First off, your assessment of the atmosphere in DRC. This is by far Africa's largest or vast, country. given the wealth of minerals, investments in that economy as well. The world is watching to see if indeed they'll pass once more that democratic test. You are in the DRC. What's your assessment of what's happening there now?
Thank you very much for having me, and hello to all your viewers. I think this is a very important moment, not only for DRC, but for Africa. And I think everyone recognizes the enormity of this project. But I know that DRC will pass the test, and there'll be no violence, hopefully. But everyone recognizes the enormity of what is going on. And you can feel the tension in the air. You can actually cut through with a knife. There's a lot of tension here, but I think it's positive tension. So we're hoping for the best.
The issues about trade investment, of course, are key on the agenda, knowing that when you talk about natural mineral deposits, the DRC comes on top on the list for many African countries. How is that shaping the kind of politicking that's going into these elections, knowing that President Felix Tshisekedi is seeking for re-election? Do you feel that he's advanced the cause of the people and managed all of these resources well to translate into what the people need, moving out of poverty?
I think the current president, Felix Tshisekedi, has done an excellent job. Like a lot of people don't recognize the size of DRC. It's the size of Western Europe to start off with. And there's a lot of indicators on the foundations that have been built. It's not a Commonwealth country, but it's a very important country for the reasons you mentioned, from coltan to gold to lithium to diamonds. DRC has it all. It's what I believe the Black Panther film, Wakanda, was based on. And I think if you look at what he's done in the past 5 years, it might not seem big enough, but relatively, I think it's been the step in the right direction. You see the passage of free secondary school education, the introduction of free maternity care for pregnant mothers in Kinshasa, which is going to be rolled out. You see the increase in the national budget from 6 billion when he took over to 16 billion now. And you see what he's done to try and stabilize the country in terms of the conflicts that are happening in the East. And I think he's going in the right direction.
But he's been criticized now, isn't he? Looking at the kind of tension is building up in the East, looking at the kind of relationship with the likes of Rwanda, the concerns about Kenya as well. These are major players in the East African community, and yet the feeling is that this is a president that's attempting to push a more isolationist approach in the midst of that call, that push to have more intra-African connection and trade. What's your take on that?
Well, there's no country like DRC, which is bordered by 9 countries, And like I said, with the size of DRC, the size of Western Europe, there's a lot of African countries that you can fit into DRC. And it wasn't going to be easy. I've never thought being able to govern a country of that size with 95 to 100 million people is going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. But I think the most important thing is when you see positive indicators where the president is going in the right direction. And I think a second term is very well deserved so that he can complete his mandate. And I think a lot of these other pieces will fall into place. But I honestly, I don't stand to gain anything from it personally, but I think he's done an excellent job so far. And I really do hope he gets a second term to prove himself.
And just before you go, the Human Rights Watch indicating that, of course, electoral violence may undermine what's happening in the DRC. You are in the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, and you know too well that investment will thrive largely on democratic stability. What's your message to, scores and millions of, over 40 million people going into the elections in the next 24 hours?
Well, I think it doesn't even have to come from me. I think, like I said in the beginning, the enormity of tomorrow is especially important and is visible to people who've lived previously in war-torn times. And I think this is not lost on them. So just as the current president And actually, the other contenders have been praying for peace and asking for peace. I hope that the people listen to it, because this is a moment not only for DRC, it's a moment for Africa. And it's time, if DRC gets it right, and a few other countries in Africa get it right, we're on our way to real economic independence. So I hope tomorrow goes very well, and we're just praying for the best.
And I thought that would have been the last one, but as the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, what role, specific ones, are you playing to enforce that?
Well, we are about the private sector because we believe that the economy is an important underpinning of what happens politically. And so our conversations, we don't get involved in politics. We leave that to the Commonwealth Secretariat, but we make sure that we galvanize the private sector. We're trying to empower the private sector, even in countries that are not part of the Commonwealth, that we hope eventually become part of the Commonwealth. We see how we can work with them to galvanize the private sector to promote economic development. That spills down to all the citizenry. So that's why we're interested in what happens, not only in Commonwealth countries, but across board.
Indeed, peace is all we want. John appears the head of mission for the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council. Grateful for your time. We're moving now to the Pope and gay rights, because early this year, Pope Francis criticized laws that criminalizes homosexuality as unjust, saying God actually loves all his children just as they are. Well, fast forward to December 18, same year, the Vatican indicating in a landmark ruling approved by the Pope Francis that the Catholic priests can now administer blessings to same-sex couples as long as they are not part of the regular church rituals or liturgies, a document from the Vatican's Doctrine Office, which effectively reversed a declaration the same body had issued in 2021, indicated that such blessings will not legitimize irregular situations, but be a sign that God welcomes all. It should also in no way be confused with the sacraments of heterosexual marriage. Well, we can have some reactions that have been greeting this ever since the announcement.
This is a milestone in the journey that the Catholic Church has taken to become closer to its LGBTQ members. For many years, we saw no progress. And then when Pope Francis came in, we began to see the doors open up a little more.
It doesn't really change their doctrine towards same-sex couples. They still believe and teach that it's a sin, meaning that it's immoral and bad. But I do view this as a very tiny step forward. At the very least, it still sends a positive message, and any kind of movement forward, I'll take it, right? So do they deserve a trophy? No, of course not. I mean, they still have a long way to go.
The document, as I read, is pretty simple in the sense that if a priest is working with a heterosexual couple who is in an irregular marriage, so they're not sacramentally married, or a same-sex couple, that we can take a moment wherever we're at, not in a church that looks like a marriage, but at any of those moments to say a prayer of blessing over them. And this comes in the context of many countries that still criminalize gay and lesbian people and their couples, as well as some people in our own country that want to move in that direction. So it is a step in a direction that says we are about blessing people. And it flows from our understanding of Matthew 5, the Beatitudes, as the Holy Father's document concludes, that we need to stop judging and do more blessing. At the core of this is a movement forward for living out the Beatitudes of Christ, of Jesus, and to include blessing of couples that do not fit into the regular, what we call regular marriage and sacrament. So the document speaks about irregular marriages and same-sex couple. This will affect many, many heterosexual couples who are active in a church, who are very passionate about being in the church, but because of a situation of their marriage, have not had a moment to be blessed.
Because of this, we're asking that question. What will be the implication of this authorization on the African church? Well, joining us now is Professor Kwabena Asamoah Jedu, who is the president, and of course, he is a theologian and also a president of the Contemporary African Christianity and Pentecostalism. He's joining us via Zoom right now. Thank you so much, Prof, for spending some time with us on this very rather controversial subject. It might concern the Orthodox Church, but the concern is that increasingly the Pentecostal side would also have to take some stance on this matter. First off, what's your reaction to this latest information we're getting from the Vatican?
Well, thank you very much and for having me, and good evening to you and to our viewers and listeners. Well, I find it very interesting. If any denomination decides that same-sex marriages should be recognized, it may perhaps not have as global an effect as you'd have in the Catholic Church. Because if you take, say, the Methodist or Presbyterian churches, although historically they are linked with the founders in Europe, the churches are independent, more or less. But the Catholic Church remains a global denomination that still recognizes papal authority. And that's why I think the decision they have made would have wider implications for world Christianity than would have happened in mainline Protestantism or even Pentecostal charismatic Christianity.
In theology, is this grounded? The fact that God loves the sinner, but not the sin. I guess that's the thinking going into all of this.
Well, I want to think that when it comes to the theology of God and his relationship with humanity, it is true to say that God loves all people. We are first human before we are anything else. So God wants us to affirm humanity. At the same time, there are boundaries that Christians are expected to observe or to respect. And one of them, I mean, for us mainline Christians, so to speak, we recognize that marriage must be between a man and a woman. There are just two genders in terms of male and female. That's what all conservative evangelicals believe. So anything outside that, I would consider unbiblical, unchristian, and therefore we must call the spade a spade and let the pieces fall where they must.
The difference between blessing same-sex couples and joining them in holy matrimony, what's the nuance to that?
It's interesting that they said that you can now bless, although according to the statement that has been issued, the fundamental position of the Catholic Church towards same-sex marriages has not changed. The point is, what is meant by blessing? Because we cannot talk about blessing without endorsement. I would have understood if they took the line that we should affirm humanity, respect the choices that people make because they are adults, although we disagree. But to say that we should bless, the question is, are we blessing the union or are we blessing the individuals in the union? So what they mean by blessing is not clear. What I understand this to mean, though, is that they wouldn't recognize same-sex marriage within a liturgical context. Right. That is a formal celebration of the marriage. But informally, a priest can bless same-sex unions. So it's something like a private blessing that is not recognized by the church. The problem it raises is that in places like Africa, in Ghana, where our laws very much stand against such unions, you create a problem for the role of the church in the state. So that's where the issues are going to be.
And talking about the church and the state, that's where the whole controversy starts from. The fact that what we see here in Africa is a pushback through legislation and some form of statecraft, the formation of laws that will tighten and possibly avert the infiltration of these gay rights into our community. But the reverse trend is what's happening in the West, for instance. You have some states, some countries also trying as much as possible to formulate laws that will ease the rights of these LGBTQ community. If you have that situation where, of course, a clergyman serves in such a community where the rights of these people are respected, yes, the church is spiritual, but it will have to obey the laws. How do we juxtapose these two factors?
Well, I think part of the problem we are having is that the Western church is still playing some kind of imperialist role in our lives. If the church in the West were not declining, we perhaps may not have been having the conversation we are having. I mean, the downward trend that we are experiencing in Western Christianity or European Christianity generally is very frightening. So in the next couple of years, you'll find that the churches will be completely empty, as we have already started seeing. That is not the same with us. And because of the dwindling numbers, it also looks like the church has lost its prophetic voice. The problem we have with them is that they create an agenda, which is, if you like, a Western agenda, and try to make it an African agenda. So I'm always fighting my European theological colleague theologians for trying to create an agenda and making it a global agenda for us.
Is that entirely the case? You listened to Cardinal Texin Appiah, for instance, who was on the BBC a couple of days ago, pointing to how, historically speaking, we're not, of course, alien to this whole culture of having identity crisis in terms of gender. You've heard that?
It's true, but it's never been an accepted Christian norm for us to recognize any other gender apart from male and female, at least not in Africa. And by the way, Cardinal Texan is based in Rome. So he will speak Roman language. And that's what I see happening.
Okay, but
because you can't be working in a context and speak against the context.
Yeah, it goes without saying. But the point also about what will happen to the charismatic movement. Yes, there's no papacy arrangement under this denomination. But the point about the future and where possibly the charismatic movement might have to tend to in the wake of this LGBT movement. What would likely happen, say, in the West and in Africa, per your analysis?
Well, wherever it has emerged, what I know is that the charismatic renewal movement within the Catholic Church in particular, and also within all the other Protestant denominations, very much resists these kinds of things that we are talking about, same-sex marriages. So if the Catholic Church pushes that agenda, I well foresee a lot of charismatic renewal movements seceding to become independent churches. That's what I see happening.
And finally, the implication for countries such as Ghana. Of course, we're doing the opposite, trying to pass a law that will check same-sex activities and also that of the LGBTQ community. But given, how there's a significant Catholic population, in fact, if you go into Parliament now, I believe that you'd find quite a significant population of the lawmakers there. Do you feel that there's a likely impact or bearing that might happen, change the course of the law that we're currently considering in Parliament?
I don't see that happening because I see very much a strong public and Christian pushback towards anything that is going to go against the grain of what we are trying to discuss in our Parliament. Because both historically, culturally, contextually, we have always been against this agenda, and I don't see it changing. So the Catholic Church would have a huge problem on its hands trying to convince people that this is the way to go. I don't see it happening in our context.
And we're grateful for your time, Professor Kwabena Asamoah-Gyedu, for talking to us here on Connect Africa. Grateful. And that's all we have for you in this package of Connect Africa. I'm Blessed Sogan. Until then, log on to myjoyonline.com. We'll see you again next week. And of course, thanks for staying with us on the Joy News channel.